By evening, Alex returned to their hotel with a newfound sense of clarity. They opened their laptop and began researching local customs and etiquette, determined to understand what they'd missed. Article after article highlighted the importance of respecting boundaries during parades, festivals, and other cultural events. Many emphasized the role of horses in ceremonies, not just as animals, but as symbols of strength and unity. Each piece of information painted a clearer picture of why their behavior had been so offensive. Feeling a mix of guilt and determination, Alex drafted a heartfelt note apologizing for their actions. They wrote about their initial ignorance, their subsequent reflections, and their commitment to learning from the experience. Addressing it to the local authorities overseeing the royal guards, Alex hoped it would reach the right people. Before sending it, they added a promise to share their story once they returned home, using it as an opportunity to teach others about the importance of cultural sensitivity. As they hit send, a wave of relief washed over them, not because they thought it would fix everything, but because it marked the beginning of accountability. Public opinion might still be split, but Alex knew they couldn't change that overnight. What they could do, however, was take ownership of their mistake and use it as a stepping stone toward growth. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since arriving in the city, Alex felt ready to face it, with humility, respect, and a desire to make things right. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the cobblestone streets of an ancient European city. The air smelled faintly of freshly baked bread from nearby bakeries and bloomed flowers that lined the narrow pathways. For Alex, this was more than just another stop on their vacation. It felt like stepping into a fairy tale. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets of centuries past, with towering cathedrals reaching toward the sky and colorful flags fluttering gently in the breeze. Alex had always dreamed of visiting such a place, imagining themselves as an explorer uncovering hidden treasures. They carried a small backpack filled with essentials, a camera, a water bottle, and a notebook for jotting down thoughts and observations. As they wandered through the winding alleys, curiosity led them closer to the heart of the city, the grand palace everyone talked about. It stood proudly at the center, its spires gleaming under the morning light, surrounded by gardens so meticulously manicured it looked like something out of a painting. But what caught Alex's attention most wasn't the architecture, or even the statuesque fountains scattered throughout the grounds. It was the sound of hooves clattering against stone, rhythmic and steady, growing louder with each passing second. Turning a corner, Alex found themselves face to face with a scene straight out of history books, a ceremonial parade featuring mounted royal guards dressed in striking uniforms. Their polished armor reflected sunlight brilliantly, while their horses moved gracefully, their coats brushed to perfection. The crowd gathered along the street buzzed with excitement. Locals watched silently, some nodding approvingly, while tourists snapped photos eagerly. Children pointed at the horses, eyes wide with wonder. Even though Alex didn't understand the language spoken around them, they could feel the reverence in the atmosphere. There was something almost sacred about the way people behaved, standing still and respectful, as if witnessing something far greater than themselves. Yet, despite the awe-inspiring sight, Alex couldn't help but notice signs posted near the route. Written in bold letters were warnings advising spectators to keep a safe distance from the procession. Some signs included images of crossed-out cameras and red lines indicating prohibited zones. To many locals, these rules were second nature, part of living in a city where tradition and protocol were deeply ingrained. But to Alex, whose mind was buzzing with enthusiasm and adrenaline, the signs barely registered. All they saw was beauty, not boundaries. Without realizing it, Alex edged closer to the procession, eager to capture every detail. Each step brought them nearer to the majestic horses, their muscles rippling beneath glossy coats. One particular horse stood out, a sleek black stallion adorned with intricate silver tack. Its mane shimmered like silk, and its eyes held a quiet intelligence. Captivated, Alex pulled out their phone, framing the perfect shot. What harm could one photo do? Surely no one would mind if they got just a little closer. Unbeknownst to Alex, their actions were drawing unwanted attention. Several pairs of eyes turned disapprovingly in their direction. A few onlookers exchanged uneasy glances, murmuring softly among themselves. The guards, too, noticed the intrusion. Their expressions remained stoic, but there was a subtle shift in posture. A tightening grip on the reins, a slight adjustment of stance. Still, Alex remained oblivious, completely absorbed in the moment, unaware that they were about to cross a line they hadn't even known existed. The next morning, Alex woke up feeling heavy, as though the weight of the previous day's events was still pressing down on their chest. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of traffic outside the window and the occasional chirping of birds, but peace was far from Alex's mind. As they reached for their phone, finally returned to them late last night, they braced themselves for what awaited online. Scrolling through social media felt like opening a door they weren't sure they wanted to walk through. Yet curiosity got the better of them. To their surprise, the story had only grown bigger overnight. News outlets had picked up the incident, turning it into a topic of discussion, not just locally but internationally. Headlines ranged from playful jabs like, "Tourist learns hard lesson after crossing line with Royal Guard," to more serious critiques, such as, "Why respecting tradition matters," a cautionary tale. Comment sections were flooded with opinions, some harsh, others thoughtful, and a few surprisingly empathetic. One comment stood out. "We've all made mistakes while traveling, but this is why we need to educate ourselves about where we go. Culture matters." Reading that line hit Alex harder than expected. It wasn't accusatory or mocking. It was a simple truth wrapped in kindness. For the first time since the incident, Alex began to see beyond their own embarrassment and discomfort. They realized that people weren't just talking about them. They were discussing something bigger, a reminder of how easy it is to overlook cultural nuances when you're caught up in the excitement of exploration. But public opinion was divided, and Alex couldn't ignore the backlash either. Some argued that the guards' reaction had been too severe, questioning whether confiscating someone's phone and publicly shaming them was truly necessary. Others defended the guard vehemently, pointing out that rules exist for a reason and that disrespecting centuries-old traditions warranted consequences. The debate raged on, with memes and jokes adding fuel to the fire. One image showed a cartoon horse rolling its eyes at a tourist snapping photos, captioned, "When you think your selfie game is stronger than royal protocol." Despite the humor, Alex found little comfort in any of it. Every joke, every critique, felt personal because, well, it was. Yet amidst the noise, there was also an undeniable lesson brewing, one that Alex couldn't afford to ignore. They decided to step away from their phone and spend some time reflecting. Sitting by the hotel window, they watched the city come alive below. Vendors setting up stalls, families strolling hand in hand, and tourists eagerly snapping photos of landmarks. It dawned on Alex that everyone here seemed to know something they hadn't grasped until now, how to exist within the rhythm of this place without disrupting it. That afternoon, unable to stay cooped up in their room, Alex ventured out cautiously, avoiding the main streets where the parade had taken place. Instead, they wandered into quieter neighborhoods, stumbling upon small cafes, hidden courtyards, and unassuming museums. In one such museum, Alex discovered an exhibit dedicated to the history of the Royal Guards, the very ones they'd encountered the day before. Old photographs, uniforms, and artifacts told stories of loyalty, discipline, and sacrifice. There were accounts of how these guards protected not just royalty, but also the values and heritage of the city itself. Standing in front of a display showcasing ceremonial swords and banners, Alex felt a lump form in their throat. These weren't just costumes or props. They represented generations of pride and responsibility. The guards weren't merely performing for tourists. They were preserving something sacred, something worth respecting. This realization struck Alex deeply. Their actions hadn't just inconvenienced a stranger in uniform. They had momentarily disrupted a tradition that meant everything to the people of this city. As Alex moved closer to the procession, their focus narrowed down to the task at hand, capturing the perfect photograph. The world around them seemed to fade away. The murmurs of the crowd, the rhythmic clatter of hooves, even the warnings etched on nearby signs all became background noise. All that mattered was getting close enough to frame the shot just right. With each step forward, Alex's excitement grew, fueled by the thrill of being so near something so grand and historic. The black stallion, with its gleaming coat and proud demeanor, stood tall and regal in front of Alex's lens. It was a sight too beautiful to resist. Alex adjusted their position slightly, angling for the best possible view. They didn't notice how the horse's ears flicked backward, catching every sound, or how its tail swished uneasily as it sensed someone encroaching on its space. To Alex, the horse was simply part of the scenery, a magnificent prop in their personal photo album. What made matters worse was Alex's growing confidence. Encouraged by the lack of immediate consequences, they decided to go one step further. Why settle for a distant shot when you could get up close? After all, no one had stopped them yet. Surely, if they were doing something wrong, someone would have said something. This line of thinking only emboldened Alex, who now stepped directly into the restricted zone marked by faint chalk lines on the cobblestones. It wasn't long before their presence caught the attention of the royal guard riding alongside the horse. Dressed in polished armor and sitting upright with practiced precision, the guard exuded authority. Their eyes scanned the crowd methodically, ensuring order was maintained. When they noticed Alex edging dangerously close, their expression remained calm but firm. A subtle gesture followed, a raised palm signaling for Alex to stop moving forward. But Alex either missed the cue entirely or chose to ignore it, too engrossed in lining up the next picture. Feeling bolder still, Alex leaned in even closer, trying to angle themselves between the horse and the backdrop of the palace gates. At this point, they were practically within arm's reach of the animal. The guard shifted slightly in their saddle, their body language tense but controlled. Another attempt to communicate came through a sharp command, spoken loud enough for Alex to hear, but not so harsh as to disrupt the solemnity of the event. "Please step back," the guard instructed, their tone measured but unmistakably serious. But instead of retreating, Alex froze, unsure of what to do next. Panic mixed with embarrassment began to creep in, though they tried to brush it off. "I'm just taking a photo," Alex muttered under their breath, more to themselves than anyone else. The words slipped out before they realized how dismissive they sounded. To the guard, and likely to those watching nearby, it came across as disrespectful, almost mocking. Here was someone blatantly disregarding protocol, seemingly unbothered by the rules meant to preserve both safety and tradition. Then, in a moment of poor judgment, Alex decided to push their luck even further. Thinking it might make for a fun memory, they reached out a hand toward the horse, intending to pat its neck. The movement startled the already uneasy animal, causing it to shift its weight nervously. Its rider reacted instantly, pulling gently on the reins to steady the beast while casting a stern glare at Alex. By now, several members of the crowd had turned to watch the unfolding scene, some shaking their heads disapprovingly, others whispering among themselves about the tourist's audacity. Alex finally seemed to grasp that they were overstepping, but it was too late. What had started as innocent enthusiasm had spiraled into something far more problematic. Instead of backing off, however, Alex hesitated, caught between wanting to salvage the situation and feeling too flustered to act wisely. And as the seconds ticked by, the tension in the air grew thicker, setting the stage for what would soon become an unforgettable and humbling lesson in respecting boundaries. Months had passed since Alex's trip to the historic city, but the lessons they'd learned continued to shape their life in unexpected ways. What began as a single misstep during a parade evolved into a journey of self-discovery and growth, one that left an indelible mark on how they viewed the world and their place within it. Traveling was no longer just about ticking destinations off a bucket list. It became an opportunity to connect deeply with cultures, histories, and people. Alex's newfound perspective influenced not only their adventures, but also their daily interactions back home. They noticed themselves becoming more mindful in everyday situations, listening more intently, asking thoughtful questions, and approaching differences with curiosity rather than judgment. This shift didn't go unnoticed by those around them. Friends remarked on how much calmer and more grounded Alex seemed, while family members joked that they'd returned from their trip a changed person. And in many ways, they were right. The travel guide Alex created, Beyond the Selfie, gained traction beyond what they ever imagined. It wasn't just shared among friends or posted online. It caught the attention of travel bloggers, educators, and even tourism boards. One organization invited Alex to collaborate on workshops aimed at promoting responsible tourism. Another asked permission to translate the guide into multiple languages, ensuring its message reached a global audience. Seeing their work resonate so widely filled Alex with pride. But more importantly, it reinforced their belief in the power of education and empathy. As time went on, Alex found joy in sharing their experiences through various platforms. Social media posts showcasing cultural insights earned thousands of likes and comments from grateful followers who appreciated the practical advice. Speaking engagements allowed them to engage directly with audiences, answering questions and sparking meaningful conversations. Each interaction reminded Alex that their story wasn't unique, it was universal. Everyone makes mistakes, but the key lies in learning from them and using those lessons to inspire others. Even the royal guards, whose stern actions had once felt like a blow too powerful to bear, came to represent something different in Alex's mind. They weren't just authority figures enforcing rules. They were guardians of tradition, entrusted with preserving something far greater than themselves. Reflecting on this, Alex reached out to Captain Elena one last time, expressing gratitude for her patience and wisdom during their meeting. In response, Elena wrote back warmly, thanking Alex for turning a challenging moment into an opportunity for positive change. She ended her note with a simple yet profound sentiment. Respect is a bridge between hearts. You've built one here. Years later, when Alex looked back on their travels, the incident with the horse remained etched in their memory, not as a source of shame, but as a turning point. It taught them that humility isn't weakness, it's strength. That mistakes aren't failures unless we refuse to learn from them. And that every culture, no matter how foreign it may seem at first glance, deserves to be approached with care and reverence. On their next big adventure, a visit to a vibrant festival in Southeast Asia, Alex put these lessons into practice. Before arriving, they spent hours researching local customs, learning everything from appropriate greetings to sacred rituals. When they joined the festivities, they did so with respect, taking care not to intrude where they weren't welcome, and always seeking permission before capturing moments on camera. Locals noticed their efforts, often smiling warmly or offering words of thanks. One elderly vendor even pressed a handmade bracelet into Alex's hand, saying simply, "You understand." In the end, Alex realized that travel wasn't about escaping the familiar. It was about finding pieces of themselves in the unfamiliar. Every encounter, every conversation, every stumble along the way added depth to their understanding of humanity. The Black Stallion and the Royal Guard might have been the catalysts for this transformation, but the real journey happened within. As Alex stood under a starlit sky halfway across the world, surrounded by laughter and music, they felt a profound sense of belonging. Not because they knew all the answers, but because they had finally learned to ask the right questions. The moment Alex's hand hovered near the horse, time seemed to slow down. The once calm atmosphere of the parade transformed into something tense and charged, like the calm before a storm. The Black Stallion, already unsettled by the close proximity of an unfamiliar figure, shifted again, its powerful muscles rippling beneath its glossy coat. Its ears flattened slightly, a clear sign of discomfort, and its tail swished rapidly as if trying to ward off an invisible threat. To the trained eye of the royal guard, these were unmistakable signals that the animal was growing agitated. The guard, who had been watching Alex with increasing concern, reacted swiftly. With practiced precision, they tightened their grip on the reins and issued a sharp command, not directed at Alex, but at the horse, to keep it calm. Their voice carried authority, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a blade. But even as they focused on controlling their mount, their piercing gaze remained fixed on Alex, silently communicating a message that required no words. Step back. Now. For Alex, however, the situation felt surreal. They hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. What began as a harmless attempt to capture a memory now felt like stepping onto thin ice. The guard's commanding tone startled them, and instead of retreating immediately, Alex froze, unsure of how to respond. Their mind raced, torn between defending their actions and realizing, perhaps too late, that they might have crossed a line. It was then that Alex made another critical mistake. Feeling cornered and embarrassed, they muttered something under their breath, loud enough for the guard to hear. "I'm not doing anything wrong," they said defensively, their voice tinged with frustration. While Alex likely meant it as an explanation, the comment landed differently in the ears of the guard and the surrounding spectators. To them, it sounded dismissive, an outright refusal to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. The guard's expression hardened further, their patience visibly wearing thin. Years of training had taught them to remain composed in high-pressure situations, but this was no ordinary breach of etiquette. These parades weren't just displays of pageantry. They were deeply rooted traditions symbolizing the city's history, pride, and unity. Every movement, every gesture, every rule existed for a reason: to protect both the participants and the sanctity of the event. For someone to disregard those rules so carelessly was seen as more than mere ignorance. It was an affront to everything the guard stood for. When Alex ignored yet another firm warning and continued reaching toward the horse, the tension reached its breaking point. The crowd collectively held its breath, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Mothers pulled their children closer, shielding them from what could become a chaotic scene. Tourists lowered their cameras, shifting their focus from capturing memories to witnessing real-life drama unfold. Finally, the guard decided that enough was enough. With one fluid motion, they raised a gloved hand, not to strike, but to deliver a different kind of blow. In a voice louder and firmer than before, they declared, "You are violating protocol. Step away immediately." The words resonated like a thunderclap, silencing any lingering murmurs in the crowd. For Alex, the weight of the statement hit hard. There was no mistaking the gravity of the situation now. This wasn't just a polite request. It was a direct order backed by centuries of tradition and authority. As Alex hesitated, still processing the enormity of the moment, the guard took decisive action. A whistle blew sharply, signaling nearby officials to intervene. Within moments, two uniformed attendants appeared at Alex's side, gently but firmly guiding them away from the procession. The crowd parted to let them through, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others exchanging sympathetic glances. It was over almost as quickly as it had begun, but the aftermath would linger long after the parade moved on. For Alex, the incident left a bitter taste. Humiliation washed over them as they realized the magnitude of their misstep. What had started as a simple desire to take a photo had spiraled into a public confrontation, leaving them feeling exposed and out of place. As they stood on the sidelines, watching the procession continue without them, they couldn't shake the sinking feeling that they had ruined not only their own experience, but also disrupted a cherished moment for everyone else. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a lesson they would never forget. When Alex's public statement went live, it rippled across social media like a stone dropped into calm water. The post was shared widely, sparking discussions that ranged from thoughtful reflections to heated debates. Some praised Alex for their vulnerability and willingness to admit fault, calling the apology refreshing and a model of accountability. Others remained critical, arguing that actions speak louder than words and questioning whether this single act of contrition could outweigh the initial disrespect shown during the parade. Despite the mixed reactions, one undeniable truth emerged. Alex's story had struck a chord. For Alex, reading through the comments was both humbling and enlightening. They expected backlash, and there was plenty of it. But what surprised them most were the messages of support. Strangers from around the world reached out, sharing their own experiences of cultural missteps while traveling. One person recounted accidentally walking into a sacred temple without removing their shoes. Another talked about unknowingly taking photos in a restricted area at a historical site. Each story carried a similar theme: lessons learned the hard way. These confessions reminded Alex that they weren't alone in making mistakes. What mattered was how they chose to grow from them. Encouraged by these exchanges, Alex decided to take things a step further. They began documenting their journey not just as a tourist, but as someone actively seeking to understand and respect the places they visited. Using their phone, the very device that had caused so much trouble, they started creating short videos explaining local customs, traditions, and etiquette. In one clip, they stood near the palace gates where the incident occurred, describing its history and importance. In another, they interviewed a local historian who spoke passionately about the role of horses in ceremonial parades. These videos weren't polished or perfect, but they were heartfelt, and viewers responded positively. Back home after their trip, Alex continued this effort, turning their experience into a personal mission. At family gatherings and friend meetups, they shared stories from their travels, not just the breathtaking sights or exciting adventures, but also the lessons they'd learned along the way. Their friends listened intently, often asking questions about cultural practices they hadn't considered before. One evening, over dinner, Alex's younger cousin asked, "How do you even know what's okay and what's not when you go somewhere new?" It was a simple question, but it stayed with Alex long after the meal ended. Inspired by the conversation, Alex decided to compile a travel guide, not a typical list of must-see attractions, but a resource focused on cultural awareness. They titled it Beyond the Selfie, a traveler's guide to respectful exploration. Inside, they included tips on researching destinations ahead of time, recognizing nonverbal cues, and understanding the significance behind local traditions. They also added anecdotes from their own trip, including the infamous horse incident, framing it not as a cautionary tale of shame, but as an opportunity for growth. The guide gained traction quickly, especially among young travelers eager to explore the world responsibly. Local schools even reached out, asking if Alex would be willing to speak to students about their experiences. Hesitant at first, Alex eventually agreed, realizing that these conversations could plant seeds of mindfulness in others. Standing in front of classrooms filled with curious faces, they spoke candidly about their misstep, emphasizing that travel wasn't just about seeing new places, it was about connecting with people and cultures in meaningful ways. One particular school visit stood out. After Alex finished speaking, a shy girl raised her hand and asked, "What if I mess up anyway? What if I accidentally offend someone?" Her question hung in the air, raw and honest. Alex smiled gently before responding, "You probably will. We all do sometimes. But here's the thing. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about being open to learning from them and showing respect every step of the way." By embracing this philosophy, Alex transformed their embarrassing mistake into something far greater, a platform for education and reflection. Though they still cringed occasionally when reminded of the viral videos or snarky memes, they no longer let those moments define them. Instead, they focused on the positive impact they were creating, one conversation and one lesson at a time. And as they packed their bags for their next adventure, they did so with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to approach each destination not as a spectator, but as a participant in its living history. The response to Alex's apology arrived sooner than expected. Within 2 days, they received an email from the Office of the Royal Guards, acknowledging their letter and expressing appreciation for their willingness to reflect and take responsibility. The tone of the message was formal yet warm, emphasizing that while mistakes happen, owning up to them is what truly matters. Enclosed with the email was a brief guide on local customs and traditions, along with an invitation to attend a private briefing about the history and significance of the Royal Guard. It wasn't mandatory, but it was clear that this gesture was meant as both a learning opportunity and a chance to rebuild trust. Alex read the email multiple times, each word sinking in deeper than the last. They hadn't anticipated such a measured and constructive response. Instead of lingering resentment or dismissal, there was openness, a willingness to turn a negative experience into something positive. For Alex, this felt like a lifeline, a way to move forward without carrying the weight of shame indefinitely. With a mix of nervousness and determination, they accepted the invitation, marking the date in their calendar. On the morning of the briefing, Alex dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were respectful and understated. As they entered the grand hall where the session was being held, they couldn't help but feel out of place. The room was adorned with portraits of past guards, intricate tapestries depicting historic battles, and glass cases displaying centuries-old artifacts. A small group of attendees sat quietly, including other visitors who had shown interest in understanding the city's heritage better. At the front stood Captain Elena, one of the senior members of the Royal Guard, whose presence commanded instant respect. Captain Elena began by sharing stories, not just of the Guard's duties today, but of their origins centuries ago. She spoke passionately about how these men and women weren't merely ceremonial figures. They were protectors of identity, symbols of unity, and custodians of tradition. Horses played a central role in this legacy, she explained, not only because of their beauty and strength, but also because they represented partnership and trust. A bond between rider and horse takes years to build, she said, her voice steady and sincere. When someone crosses that boundary, even unintentionally, it disrupts more than just the moment. It challenges the foundation of what we stand for. As Alex listened intently, they realized how much depth there was behind every detail they'd taken for granted during the parade. The polished armor wasn't just decorative. It symbolized resilience. The choreographed movements weren't just performances. They were acts of discipline passed down through generations. Even the warnings etched on those signs near the route weren't arbitrary. They were reminders of mutual respect, designed to ensure safety and preserve dignity for everyone involved. After the presentation, Captain Elena opened the floor for questions. When Alex hesitantly raised their hand, the room fell silent. Their voice trembled slightly as they admitted their mistake and thanked the captain for allowing them to learn directly from those affected by it. To their surprise, Captain Elena smiled warmly and nodded. "We understand that no one sets out to cause harm," she replied. "But understanding leads to change, and change strengthens our shared future." Her words resonated deeply with Alex, leaving them feeling seen not as a reckless tourist, but as someone capable of growth. Before leaving, Alex asked if there was anything else they could do to make amends. Captain Elena suggested writing a public statement, something honest and reflective that could be shared with the community. It wouldn't erase the incident, she admitted, but it might inspire others to approach unfamiliar cultures with greater mindfulness. Grateful for the advice, Alex agreed and spent the rest of the day drafting their thoughts. That evening, sitting alone in their hotel room, Alex poured their heart into the statement. They wrote candidly about their ignorance, their embarrassment, and their gratitude for the lessons learned. They acknowledged the patience of the guards and the importance of respecting boundaries, vowing to carry these insights beyond their travels. By the time they finished, tears pricked at the corners of their eyes, not from regret alone, but from the realization that they were changing. This wasn't just about apologizing anymore. It was about becoming someone who valued connection over convenience, respect over recklessness. When the statement was published online a few days later, reactions varied. Some praised Alex's honesty and courage, calling it a powerful reminder of humility. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether words alone could undo the damage done. But as Alex stood there, flanked by the two uniformed attendants who had escorted them away from the procession, the full weight of what had just happened began to sink in. The once joyful buzz of the crowd had shifted into something colder, more judgmental. Whispers rippled through the spectators like a gust of wind, each murmur carrying fragments of disapproval and disbelief. "Did you see that?" one person muttered to another. "Unbelievable," came the reply. Some shook their heads, while others simply turned away, as if distancing themselves from the spectacle. The Royal Guard, meanwhile, resumed their position in the parade without so much as a backward glance. Their composure was unshaken, their focus firmly back on guiding the horse and maintaining the dignity of the ceremony. To them, this was not personal, it was duty. They had done exactly what years of training had prepared them for, protecting the sanctity of the event, ensuring order, and upholding tradition. But for Alex, the moment felt deeply personal. Every pair of eyes that lingered on them, every hushed comment they overheard, felt like a spotlight shining directly on their shame. The attendants didn't say much as they led Alex to a quieter area near the edge of the square. One of them held out a hand, gesturing for Alex's phone, the very device that had sparked the entire ordeal. Confused at first, Alex hesitated, clutching it tightly. "What are you doing?" they asked, their voice tinged with panic. The attendant responded calmly but firmly, explaining that taking photos during such events was strictly prohibited, especially when it involved crossing boundaries or endangering the animals. Reluctantly, Alex handed over the phone, feeling a mix of anger and embarrassment bubbling inside them. Once the phone was secured, the attendants informed Alex that they would need to wait until the end of the parade before retrieving it. Until then, they were advised to leave the area immediately and avoid any further disruption. For Alex, this was yet another blow. Losing access to their camera felt like losing a part of their vacation itself. Photos were how they documented their travels, how they shared experiences with friends and family back home. Now, those memories were temporarily out of reach, locked away because of a single lapse in judgment. But the punishment didn't stop there. As Alex walked away from the scene, still dazed and humiliated, they couldn't help but notice the stares following them. Some people looked amused, others annoyed, and a few even sympathetic. A local vendor selling souvenirs gave Alex a knowing glance, shaking his head slightly as if to say, "You should have known better." Even the children, who moments earlier had been marveling at the horses, now seemed to regard Alex with wide-eyed curiosity, or perhaps pity. Back at the hotel later that afternoon, Alex replayed the incident over and over in their mind, unable to shake the feeling of being singled out. It wasn't just about the confiscated phone or the stern warnings. It was the realization that they had unintentionally disrespected something far greater than themselves. This wasn't just a random tourist attraction. It was a piece of living history, cherished by the people of the city and protected fiercely by those entrusted with its preservation. And Alex, in their eagerness to capture the perfect shot, had trampled all over it. Social media only made things worse. By the time Alex returned to their room, videos of the confrontation had already surfaced online. Someone in the crowd must have filmed the entire exchange, capturing Alex's awkward attempts to justify themselves and the guard's unwavering response. Comments poured in from strangers around the world, some criticizing Alex's behavior, others defending the guard's actions. The hashtags #RespectTradition and #TouristFails started trending, with screenshots of Alex's face circulating widely. Though blurred to protect their identity, the resemblance was unmistakable. For Alex, scrolling through these posts was both surreal and mortifying. Here was evidence of their mistake immortalized for anyone to see, dissected and debated by people they didn't know. What had seemed like a harmless decision, to get closer, to take a photo, had spiraled into a public spectacle. The irony wasn't lost on them. In trying to document a beautiful memory, they had created one they wished they could erase entirely. By evening, Exhaustion set in, not just physical, but emotional. Alex sat alone in their hotel room, staring blankly at the wall, replaying everything that had gone wrong. They thought about the guard's commanding presence, the crowd's judgmental whispers, and the countless notifications lighting up their social media accounts. It was overwhelming. But amidst the chaos, a small seed of understanding began to grow. Maybe, just maybe, this painful experience would teach them something valuable about respect, boundaries,